moment Mike walked back into Bill's orbit, I knew this wasn't going to be just another legal battle. This felt personal, calculated, ugly in the most dangerous way possible. And honestly, that's what makes this storyline in Beyond the Gates so much more interesting than a simple courtroom drama. Because this is no longer about who's right. It's about who understands power better. For a while, Bill's biggest problem seemed to be Haley and the constant pressure surrounding Lynette's blackmail situation. But now that Haley has temporary breathing room and Lynette is no longer actively controlling the narrative, the entire story has shifted. The spotlight moved fast, and it landed directly on Madison's lawsuit and Mike's revenge. That change matters more than people realize, because the writers are quietly showing us something important. Bill never truly escaped the consequences of the way he built his career. He only delayed them. And Mike is the consequence. The confrontation between them was honestly one of the sharpest scenes we've had recently because the tension wasn't built on screaming or theatrics. It was built on recognition. Mike knows Bill, really knows him, not the polished attorney version, not the respected public figure. The real Bill, the man behind the strategies, manipulation, intimidation, and legal games. That's why Mike's threats hit differently. When Mike said he could use Madison's case to destroy Bill, it didn't sound like empty intimidation. It sounded believable. And that's the scary part. The near death of a child instantly changes the emotional temperature of the lawsuit. Mike understands that juries don't always respond to technical legal arguments. They respond to emotion, fear, sympathy, moral outrage. He knows Hazel Harcourt's side suddenly has a narrative weapon that can overpower logic in a courtroom. And the most brutal part, Mike basically admitted he learned these tactics from Bill. That scene completely reframed the power dynamic for me. At first glance, it looks like Mike is the villain returning to cause chaos. But if you really pay attention, he almost feels like a distorted mirror reflection of Bill himself. Every manipulative strategy Mike threatens to use sounds suspiciously similar to methods Bill probably normalized years ago. Dragging lawsuits out for years, destroying reputations through pressure, forcing settlements through exhaustion, weaponizing public perception. Mike isn't inventing anything new. He's using Bill's own playbook against him. That's why Bill looked shaken, not just angry. There's a difference. If someone accuses you unfairly, you fight back immediately. But when someone exposes methods you actually recognize, your reaction changes. You hesitate, and Bill hesitated multiple times during that confrontation. That detail was intentional. What I found especially fascinating was Mike's confidence. He didn't enter the conversation trying to negotiate peacefully. He entered already believing he had leverage. That means he either has evidence, insider knowledge, or enough psychological understanding of Bill to know exactly where to apply pressure. And honestly, Bill helped create this situation himself. I keep coming back to one uncomfortable question. If Bill had always worked ethically, why would Mike's threats feel so dangerous? That's the core issue here. The show is slowly exposing Bill's biggest weakness, and it's not incompetence. It's moral inconsistency. Bill wants to be respected as a principled man, but too many cracks keep appearing in that image. The Lynette situation already hinted that Bill's past decisions created long-term disasters he couldn't fully control. Now Mike is basically confirming it. Bill built systems of pressure. Now he's trapped inside one. And Naomi's role in this story suddenly makes much more sense because of that. I don't think it's accidental that Naomi has maintained professional distance from Bill despite his obvious desire for her to eventually inherit the firm. The show keeps subtly suggesting that Naomi sees something fundamentally flawed in the way Bill operates. Not weak legally, weak ethically. There's a huge difference. Naomi's reaction to Mike was also interesting because she immediately attacked Mike's lack of integrity. On the surface, she was defending Bill. But beneath that, I almost felt frustration from her toward both men. Because Mike may be shameless, but Bill may have created the environment that allowed someone like Mike to thrive in the first place. That's the kind of layered writing I appreciate. Then came the number, $40,000. And suddenly the entire conversation transformed. The second Mike wrote that amount down, the scene stopped being about legal strategy and became something much darker. Extortion disguised as negotiation. Bill instantly recognized it too. His reaction wasn't confusion. It was outrage. Because deep down, he understood exactly what Mike was doing. And personally, I think Bill is absolutely correct not to trust him. Even if Bill paid Mike, there's almost no chance Mike would simply walk away peacefully afterward. Mike's motivations are clearly emotional as much as financial. Revenge is driving him. Pride is driving him. Humiliation is driving him. People motivated by revenge rarely stop after getting money. They want emotional satisfaction. Mike doesn't just want compensation. He wants Bill to suffer. That's why I think this storyline is more dangerous than viewers may realize. A lot of people are treating this as a normal soap rivalry, but structurally, this feels like a collapse arc. The lawsuit threatens everything: Bill's reputation, Madison's future, the firm itself, Chelsea's family stability, Naomi's trust in Bill, public perception. One loss could trigger a chain reaction. And honestly, Mike probably knows that. What also stood out to me was how strategic the show became with Chelsea and Madison's entrance into Bill's office. That scene grounded the emotional chaos with something more human. Madison immediately blaming herself felt believable. She understands that this lawsuit is no longer affecting only her. It's spreading outward and pulling multiple people into the conflict. That guilt makes sense psychologically. But Chelsea's response might have been one of the most emotionally mature moments we've seen from her in a long time. When Chelsea basically said, "Your family now, helping you is what we do," it changed the tone completely. Because while Mike and Bill are fighting through fear and manipulation, Chelsea approached the situation through loyalty. That contrast matters. And honestly, I think the writers are quietly positioning Chelsea as the emotional backbone of this storyline. Not Bill, not Naomi, Chelsea. Why? Because she operates differently. She doesn't view support as transactional leverage. She views it as responsibility. That's rare in this current narrative where almost every relationship is tied to power, secrets, or strategic advantage. Ironically, Chelsea may become the one person capable of holding this fractured group together while the legal war escalates around them. But let's talk about the biggest issue no one is discussing enough. Bill is entering a legal battle against someone who already understands his methods. That is terrifying. Most lawyers rely not only on intelligence, but unpredictability. Mike removes that advantage completely. He already knows how Bill thinks under pressure. He likely knows Bill's negotiation patterns, emotional triggers, risk tolerance, and strategic habits. That changes the battlefield entirely. It's like playing chess against someone who studied your previous 100 games. Suddenly, every move becomes dangerous. And this is where I think the show could take a very smart direction. Everyone assumes the main conflict is Bill versus Mike. I don't think it is. I think the real conflict is Bill versus the version of himself he spent years building. Mike is simply the weapon exposing it. That's the twist I keep circling back to. Because the story isn't asking whether Bill is talented enough to win. He obviously is. The real question is whether Bill can survive a battle where his own past tactics are being reflected back at him publicly. That's much harder, especially when Naomi is watching, especially when Chelsea and Madison are depending on him, especially when one wrong move could validate every accusation Mike is making. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Mike might actually be right about one thing. Long legal warfare does destroy people regardless of who wins. Even if Bill eventually defeats Mike in court, years of public accusations, emotional exhaustion, financial strain, and reputational damage could still ruin everyone involved. That's why this storyline feels so heavy right now. There's no clean victory available anymore, only damage control. That's also why I think Bill needs to stop reacting emotionally and start thinking strategically. Mike wants chaos. He wants Bill angry, defensive, desperate. The more emotional Bill becomes, the more mistakes he'll make. And Bill has a history of making dangerous decisions under pressure. We've already seen it. The Lynette disaster proved it. This lawsuit may expose it permanently. In a strange way, this entire storyline feels like a test of whether Bill can evolve or whether he's permanently trapped by the systems he once benefited from. Because power built through fear always creates enemies. Eventually, one of them learns your methods well enough to fight back. And Mike clearly did. The scariest part isn't that Mike returned for revenge. The scariest part is that Bill looked like a man who realized, maybe for the first time, that revenge might actually work.